My fiancée said she was just supporting her ex during his treatment, then I found out she'd secretly moved in with him. I've always believed that trust is sacred. It's the foundation of every healthy relationship. I never imagined that someone I loved, someone I had planned to spend the rest of my life with, could quietly unravel that trust under the guise of compassion. My fiancée, Mia, had been the center of my world for nearly 5 years. We were inseparable, planning a wedding 6 months away, talking about kids, careers, and dreams that we had shared in long, intimate conversations. We had photos of ourselves pinned up in frames across our apartment. Every corner held a memory, a piece of our life together. I thought our bond was unshakable. Then came Ryan. He was Mia's ex-boyfriend, her first serious love, and by all accounts, someone she had claimed to have moved on from years before we met. He was diagnosed with a chronic autoimmune condition, something that required frequent treatments and left him disoriented and exhausted. Mia told me she wanted to help because he had no one else nearby, his family lived on the East Coast, and most of his friends had moved away. She framed it as altruism, pure support, and I told myself that being understanding didn't make me weak or insecure. I wanted to be supportive, to trust her judgment. I believed in the woman I loved. At first, her involvement was minimal. She'd drive him to appointments once a week, check in with him over text, and occasionally bring groceries. She was careful to reassure me that it was temporary. I reminded myself to be empathetic. But the first time she stayed overnight at his apartment, I felt a subtle, gnawing unease. She said she slept on the couch. She returned the next morning, kissed me on the cheek, and carried on as if nothing had changed. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to be the compassionate partner. But doubt had begun to plant itself in the corners of my mind. Weeks passed, and the visits became longer, more frequent. Overnight stays turned into 2 nights, sometimes 3. Small overnight bags grew into suitcases. She justified it each time. He was weak after treatment, he needed her support, it was temporary, it was for his health. I swallowed my growing anxiety, convinced myself that I was overthinking. But every cancelled vendor meeting, every distracted conversation about our wedding plans, chipped away at my sense of normalcy. The woman I thought I knew seemed increasingly unavailable, emotionally distant, her attention divided between me and someone she claimed needed her. Then came the texts. The first time I saw them, my hands shook. I wasn't snooping, I hadn't intended to, but a notification on her phone caught my eye. "Ryan, I missed this." Her reply, "Being here with you feels right again." I stared at the screen, disbelief rooting me to the spot. The messages were not about medication, logistics, or support. They were intimate, affectionate, and unmistakably romantic. I felt my stomach twist into knots. How could someone I loved, someone who had promised me a future, say these things to someone else? I confronted her immediately. She admitted she had moved in with him, that the overnight stays were no longer temporary, that feelings she thought were gone had resurfaced. Her words were hesitant, apologetic, but devoid of accountability. She tried to frame it as confusion, as responsibility, as something that just happened. But I knew better. This was deception. A choice repeated over and over until I was effectively erased from her priorities. My heartbreak was profound, but beneath it simmered a sharp anger. 5 years of trust, loyalty, and shared dreams could not be undone, yet they had been dismantled quietly, methodically, without regard for the life we had built. The weeks after the breakup were disorienting. I oscillated between grief, disbelief, anger, and shame. I felt embarrassed for having ignored the red flags, for having trusted her fully. Friends and family rallied around me, offering support, validation, and a listening ear. Conversations with my parents were painful but grounding, they reminded me that my worth was not diminished by her choices. Therapy became essential. Speaking with a professional helped me untangle emotions I didn't know how to process: betrayal, loss, confusion, humiliation. Journaling became a tool for self-preservation. I detailed every interaction, every decision Mia had made that contributed to the collapse of our engagement, as a way to reclaim the narrative of my life. Over time, I began to notice the toxic patterns in our relationship. Her empathy for Ryan had been a guise for emotional manipulation. She had prioritized someone else's needs over our shared life while portraying it as virtue. I recognized that this pattern had existed for months, subtle yet persistent, and that my attempts to rationalize or forgive had only enabled it. This realization was both painful and liberating. Painful because it confirmed the depth of the betrayal, liberating because it allowed me to separate myself from the toxicity that had overtaken what should have been a healthy, loving partnership. I established boundaries, both physical and emotional. Mia's continued presence, even indirectly through social media, triggered reminders of betrayal. I unfollowed her accounts, blocked notifications, and focused on rebuilding my space and emotional equilibrium. I redecorated the apartment, reorganized personal items, and consciously made my environment reflect autonomy and control over my life. Friends became my sounding board. I spoke openly about the experience, about the emotional abuse hidden behind the veneer of compassion. Their support reinforced my understanding that what Mia did was not my fault and that leaving the engagement was an act of self-preservation. Healing was not linear. Some days, grief and anger returned in waves. Seeing pictures of her and Ryan together on social media triggered emotional storms. But with time, perspective emerged. I learned to recognize my feelings without judgment, to honor my pain while refusing to allow it to define my future. I reconnected with old hobbies, invested energy in friendships, and began to see opportunities for personal growth I had previously neglected while immersed in a toxic relationship. One afternoon, I stumbled across a box of our wedding planning materials, guest lists, floral arrangements, seating charts. Instead of sorrow, I felt a sense of clarity. This was a life I had been preparing for someone who no longer shared my intentions. Recognizing this allowed me to grieve fully and then release. I understood that loving someone requires reciprocity, trust, and respect. Without those, love becomes a chain rather than a bond, and liberation from it is essential. Reflecting back, the experience taught me painful but invaluable lessons. I learned to recognize subtle emotional manipulation, to trust intuition when red flags appear, and to prioritize self-respect over social expectations. Mia's choices were her own, they reflected her values, not mine. My heartbreak was a catalyst for profound personal growth. By stepping away from a toxic dynamic, I reclaimed control over my emotional life and discovered resilience I hadn't realized I possessed. Today, I am cautious but hopeful. I understand the complexities of human relationships, and I carry the lessons of betrayal and deception with me. The experience has instilled in me a clearer understanding of trust, boundaries, and the importance of emotional honesty. I am not defined by her choices or by the pain she caused, but by my response to it, by my decision to honor myself, to rebuild, and to move forward with integrity. While the betrayal remains a scar, it is no longer a wound. It serves as a reminder of my capacity to endure, to recover, and to choose relationships rooted in mutual respect and authenticity. I continue to navigate life with empathy, tempered by discernment, and a commitment to never compromise my emotional well-being for someone else's convenience. I am stronger, wiser, and more attuned to the signs of toxicity, prepared to cultivate connections that reflect trust, reciprocity, and genuine care.